Why is this in Spanish?
Okay, 39 inches, got it. For up to 36 inches.
Okay, so I'm supposed to... I don't know. Something like...
I think I'm ready. Wait.
Okay, Marvelous Designer versus Clo3D. The base technology between the two pieces of software is essentially the same thing. Marvelous Designer is used primarily in video games, special effects, CG, movies like 1010, video games like The Witcher use Marvelous Designer. But Clo3D is more this robust solution for fashion and apparel and actual garment designs that you have to sew for the real world. So one of the biggest things for me, Clo3D software allows me to create these digital patterns virtually, so I can use 3D sewing for my cosplay patterns and costumes, and I know that they're going to fit me and my body type. Then I can simulate the fabrics in real time and make adjustments to the patterns and the types of fabrics before I actually print off this PDF pattern and cut and sew my pattern. It saves me time designing patterns digitally. I don't waste fabric. I know exactly how much fabric I need to buy before a project. And then if I want, I can choose to sell my patterns on, Etsy or the internet. I can even import my Fusion 360 designs that I use for 3D printing or CNC for the laser cutter, and it just helps my cosplay projects flow together seamlessly, and I know that everything is going to fit.
I know I'm going to get a bunch of questions about why I don't just make quick patterns in Illustrator or drawing or on tape. Because the reality is I'm not an artistic or a creative person without the use of technology or a computer. I mean, if you want a really good stick figure, I can draw you a really good stick figure. So you have these really cool avatars that you can use, and I have my measurements, import my measurements once in this program. I can do my designs, and I don't have to be artistic simulation and how fabrics fall. So this is the material that we're gonna use. So it's a polyester and a little bit of a spandex. So it stretches one way more than the other. So what's really cool about this program is you can actually go in and you can put your materials, your fabric, and you can alter them. So when I drop this piece of fabric, and I expect this piece of fabric to sit on my body in that same way. So you can simulate your patterns in your fabric.
So Clo3D can run on a Windows or a Mac PC. This is Clo3D, and you can see a lot of cosplay patterns have a base bodysuit or something similar to that. So this is just kind of my process of how I make one of these base bodysuits. So in Clo3D, you have your 3D window, which you can scroll around, zoom in, pan, and then over here on the right is your 2D window. The 2D window is where you're going to actually create all of your patterns, and you're going to notice whatever you create in the 2D window will show up in the 3D window. So one thing that makes this tool so powerful is this simulation button right here. The simulation, when it's selected, all unfixed patterns fall down to the ground when gravity is applied to the 3D window. So I'm just going to create 3 base rectangle pieces here with the default fabric applied, nothing fancy. When you run this simulation, all of these fabrics are going to fall to the ground. So when you buy a fabric, it usually says on the end of the fabric what the material is. So this Yaya Han says that it is 94% polyester and 6% spandex. So you just come into your fabric selection over here in Clo3D and you pick the pattern that has that same property. If your fabric does not exist, you can actually come into this physical property window and change the material or how stuff moves. So when we apply this spandex, you notice that when we run the simulation, this pattern and this piece of fabric falls differently than a piece of cotton or a piece of silk would. So over here on the left-hand side, you can hover over each piece of fabric and it will tell you about the property of each piece of fabric. So what makes it really awesome is I was working on this fake cosplay skirt, and Things like silk would not be good for that, or cotton. So knowing the physical property of how stuff is going to lay or stick out or whatever is going to happen to that piece of fabric when gravity is applied to it. That's what makes this program so powerful, is when you apply gravity to this piece of fabric. So one of the awesome things about Clo3D is it has these built-in avatars. So you can load one of the default avatars, if it'll load, come on. And then you can come in here to this avatar editor and you can adjust all the measurements for the avatar. Now, the one thing I've noticed that it doesn't do very well is adjust like boob cup size, or I guess butt cheek size. So when you try to come in here to the editor and adjust like the sternum or the cup size, it like enlarges the rib cage and like everything, and it just looks like an alien kind of strange thing. But if you have a 3D scan of yourself or a custom avatar that you've made in any program that is an FBX, you can just import it into here and you have your exact body scan for your exact body type. This is freaking awesome. So we're going to start to create our pattern. You're going to create your pattern over here in the 2D window. We're just going to drag a normal rectangle, and you'll see whatever is here in the 2D window shows up in the 3D window on the left as well. So up at this top toolbar, you have a few little things to do for editing. You can edit to drag these points or the pattern. You can add curves. You can do digital sewing. You can even do ironing. And you can turn the fabric on and off. So if you just wanted to see the sketch and not the actual physical fabric. So another really quick tip that you should do from the beginning, there is this high-res property editor over here on the left-hand side that you will see. It's in the 3D window. Just click here, look at the high-res property, and you can edit garment thickness. If you were using a pattern to maybe make something that was out of EVA foam, and you know your EVA foam is 3 millimeters, 5 millimeters, or even if you're going to be making something out of leather. So what is seam allowance? Seam allowance is that little bit of extra fabric that you need to actually sew the two pieces of fabric together. Because you can see this takes up a little bit of extra room, and when you sew these two pieces of fabric together, you lose a little bit of material. So one of the things that makes Clo3D so powerful is that you can add the seam allowance to your pattern. So when you print out your patterns and you sew fabrics together in the real world, whether it's on a sewing machine or a serger, you have that little bit of seam allowance. So you come up here to the 2D create window or 2D pattern, then create, and then seam allowance. So you can adjust the seam allowance for either, I think standard's 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter or 15 millimeters. You can come in and adjust whatever seam allowance that you want. If you have to edit or enlarge your pattern, the seam allowance is automatically recalculated for you. You don't have to redo it again. So now we can start to make our pattern for our bodysuit. So we're going to need a left and a right for the front and a left and a right for the back. So you could come in here, right click, copy, and paste, and now you have two pieces. But what happens is if you start to come in here and adjust your points and to one side, then you have to come in here and make sure they're symmetric on the other side. And this gets annoying and frustrating trying to line everything up perfect. So instead, we're just gonna undo all of this and we're going to delete that and come in here, right click, and you're gonna do mirror paste. So what you're gonna do is you're going to mirror paste that exact pattern. So now we have two of the exact same pieces, and then we're gonna come in here to symmetry. So the symmetry we can use for the other two pieces. So you'll have two for the front, two for the back, and whatever changes you make to those symmetry pieces will take place on the other piece as well. And I'm just moving these pieces over so they're over this shadow of this avatar. So now if you look over here in the 3D window, we actually have these four pieces. Two pieces are for the front, two pieces are for the back. You can try to kind of come in here and move the pieces to where you think they should fit on the body, twist them and turn them. It's kind of annoying, and then you twist things the wrong way and then screw everything up. If this happens also, you can come into this, there's the 3D button or the 3D create, and you can reset your patterns 3D or 2D, and it will just pull them back to their original position. In the 3D window, you're going to select the avatar and the pattern arrangement dots. So you notice when we have the front pieces selected, they highlight here and you can see the actual shadow where they'll show on the body. Now remember, because we have symmetry, that it's taking those two pieces, so whatever you do for the left side is also going to do it for the right side as well. And they will just snap to where they need to go on the body. So we're going to do the same thing for the back pieces as well. And as you can see, they're highlighted here in green in the 2D window, and that indicates you'll also see that it's highlighted in the 3D window as well. So as you see by the shadow, you just snap it to where you need it to go on the blue dots on your avatar, and it's there. So now we can run our simulation, right? Yay! Well, crap, what happened? Oh, we need to actually 3D sew our pattern together. All right, let's get going. So over here in the 2D window, you'll see you have a few options for sewing. You have these little sewing machines, some with a dot. You can even do ironing and steaming if you want, if it wasn't already bad enough in the real world. So we're gonna go ahead and do the sewing. Click right here, and you can, if you need to reset your patterns over here in the 3D window, just remember you can come up here into the 3D. You can reset your 3D patterns or your 2D pattern. Okay, so we're gonna start sewing. So what you wanna do is select the two pieces that you wanna sew together. So when you select these two pieces, they'll be indicated by straight lines across of the two patterns they're actually going to be attached. So if you zoom over here in the 3D window, you can actually see that these straight lines are together. So we're going to repeat the steps for the back. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick little common thing that happens when you do the 3D sewing. So if we're going to come in here and just delete these two stitches we did for the back. You come into next to the sewing machine right here to edit. I'm just going to delete the ones we created, and then I'm going to do the sewing again, the top and the bottom. So you'll see it's indicated by a giant X. So you do not want to do that because the two patterns will actually be flipped and squished, and when you run the simulation, the pattern and the fabrics will be all twisted. So now we need to start adding some shape to our bodysuit. Now remember, you can make really complicated cosplay patterns that fit your exact body type in this program, but since we're just doing a basic bodysuit right now, I just want to show you the basic fundamentals so you can get to that point. So just remember up here in your 2D pattern window, you can add points to your rectangle design. We can add curvature. So just think of it this way. I kind of need a place for my arms to go. So I need an armhole. So I can add some curvature points here to my design. And don't worry too much exactly where the points go because you can adjust those. So when I'm adding points and curvature, you just clicked on the curve right here or click to edit, and you just click and hold to drag. So I'm following this 2D outline shape, if you see the shadow of the avatar here in the 2D window. And everything I do in the 2D window is showing over here in the 3D window automatically. And remember, since our patterns are symmetric, anything I do to the left side is also symmetric to the right side. So I only have to worry about doing patterns on one side. So we're going to come in here and make sure you have your edit point tool selected, and you can kind of click and drag it up so you have more of that bikini shape for the bodysuit. Then you can make any other little detailed adjustments you want to the bodysuit to do it for the style that you're trying to follow, or just any adjustments. Now that we have like a basic shape for our bodysuit, you can see over here in the window, we need a back because now we have the front pieces that are done. So we're going to use that same tool that I showed you in the beginning, where we're going to right click, copy, and we're going to do the mirror paste, and then we're going to right click on that piece and make sure that it has symmetry. So our front pieces will have symmetry and our back pieces will have symmetry. Now the nice thing about the pieces having symmetry is, since we know that the front side is the same and the back side will be the same, we can just print off one of the front pieces and one of the back. So now we need to actually come in here and arrange our patterns to fit on our avatar. So in the 3D window, come over here to the avatar, click on the blue arrangement dots, and select your pattern. So now you'll see that the two pieces are attached and they snap to the body on the back. Next, we need to sew the sides of the bodysuit pattern. So make sure in the 2D window you have the sewing machine selected, and you can sew the sides of the pattern by selecting the pattern in the 3D window or in the 2D window. You'll see that it's indicated that your sewing is done correctly to the right side of the pattern by the straight lines in between. So we also need to sew the tops of the bodysuit since we don't want it to fall off when we're wearing it. If you see anything that's twisted in an X shape, just make sure you edit it and re-sew them together indicated by the straight line. And if you see anything that gets twisted or it's like a small piece that's hard to see, you can zoom in over here on the 2D window and you can see what you're selecting. So now we can turn off our arrangement dots on our avatar and we can run our simulation on our pattern. Woohoo! So what makes this program so powerful compared to programs like Adobe Illustrator when you're making your 2D patterns is 2D patterns are fine until you apply gravity or simulation or different types of like physical properties for fabrics, and you don't know how they fit or how they stretch. So since this fabric is a little bit stretchy, you can see it's baggy here. So I want to adjust it. So I've just saved myself time, fabric, and frustration to fit stuff for my body type and the type of fabric I'm using. Now I'm just going to come in here and adjust stuff. I see it's a little too much like side boob, and I'm just going to come in here and adjust the points to how I like the bodysuit. You can add your own color or patterns to the fabric, so I just added the Yaya Han black. And you can come in here and start to adjust and shape things for your avatar and your mannequin. There's some people that are really, really good seamstress and they can just see how a 2D pattern is supposed to lay out and fit on a person. I am not one of those people. I rely very much on the technology and the tools that I am provided to create these 3D patterns to fit my body type. We have a pattern for our bodysuit that we're happy with. Okay, and it also has the seam allowance annotations on the outside of our pattern. So now how much fabric do we need? You come up here in the top window where it says simulation, you're gonna select on the pattern layout. And as you see over here, it's gonna tell you how many yards of fabric that your pattern is gonna take up. That is freaking awesome. So now we're gonna come back here and we know how many yards of fabric we need. So since our patterns have this, since our patterns are symmetric, we have our front and our back, we only need to print off one of the front and one of the back. So before we print off our patterns, you may want some annotations or notes if you're gonna sell these. So you come over here to 2D Create, Pattern Annotation, and select Pattern Annotation. We're just gonna come over here and write back and front. So when I print off these patterns, I'll have an indication of what is the front and what is the back. So if you want to see, these will actually just be displayed. So you can go back up to the 2D pattern layout over here on the right, and you can see it'll say front and back. Now we're ready to export and print our pattern. So you're going to come down here to File, and you're going to do Snapshot, and you're going to see that this 2D snapshot has an actual area for you to select your paper size, which is awesome because I know in some countries they use A3. Here in the US we use standard, usually letter, but you can pick whatever paper size you have for your printer. And then you can also pick what information you want to be on your pattern. So like if you want any other details for sizes, measurements, or seam allowance, but since I'm not selling this pattern's just for me, I'm not going to select any of those. I'm just going to leave where it says front and back. After you have all the options you want selected, just click Save. And then I'm going to import it into my Adobe Illustrator. Now the reason I import it into Adobe Illustrator is because you can see right here that I have where it says A1, A2, so I know where, since this pattern is going to take up more than one piece of paper, I know where these patterns need to print off together. So you're going to print your pattern, then you're going to tape your pattern, then you're going to cut your pattern, get your fabric ready, then you're going to lay your pattern on the seam right there, fold it in half. You're going to see, then you're going to cut your fabric out. So since we have symmetric, we cut it on the seam, we have a front and a back piece. Repeat the same steps for the back pattern. Then you're going to pin or clip the pieces of fabric together. And then you're going to sew or serge the pieces of fabric together. Remember that 5/8 seam allowance. Then you're going to turn the pieces right side out, make sure it fits, add any other additional details, and now you have a bodysuit and can make lots of awesome new things. Woohoo! So bonus for you 3D printing and CNC people out there, I can actually take my FBX designs that I make in Fusion 360 and I can import them into Clo3D. So I can see if I have any pieces that I need to laser cut for my foam or my 3D printed designs. Can someone help me get out of this duct tape prison?